He was known as the absolute Tyrant King, the strongest player who held the power of life and death in the virtual world of the lost. But blinded by his own flawless victories, he fell right into a deadly trap set by the treacherous 𝒂𝒏𝒌 guild. Their leader was none other than the SS-rank monster, Odin. Yet, the Tyrant King was always one step ahead. He had prepared a forbidden resurrection curse just in case. But fate played a cruel joke, and the system glitched. The glitch dragged his soul exactly 3 years into the past. His godlike stats? Completely reset to 0. But Råkan merely smirked. Armed with his future knowledge and absolute battle mastery, he vowed to hunt down every last traitor. This time, he would conquer the 3 great worlds entirely. Putting his veteran experience to work immediately, Råkan effortlessly slaughtered a high-level goblin. It was child's play for a former king. Ding! The system chimed, granting him double the usual stat points for the impressive kill. Knowing that these vile creatures always hunted in massive swarms, he employed a ruthless divide-and-conquer strategy, executing them one by one in the shadows. Blood stained the forest floor. However, he knew the game's hidden mechanics. Once the horde dropped below 15 survivors, the alpha boss would sense the slaughter and summon lethal elite variants. Anticipating this exact nightmare, Råkan instantly switched to Plan B. After a nerve-wracking life-and-death struggle, he emerged victorious. His brilliant tactic? Luring the monsters in groups of 3 into an abandoned apothecary. Inside the shop, it was a bloodbath. He chugged health potions while continuously swinging his weapon, perfectly balancing recovery and absolute destruction. With flawless evasion, he decimated the remaining vanguard in seconds. But the real nightmare had just arrived. The alpha boss stepped into the light, roaring with fury. Råkan did not flinch. Packing 20 strength and healing potions in his inventory, he charged forward like a madman. That arsenal was more than enough to obliterate the annoying small fry. Heads rolled as his blade danced through the air, leaving behind a gruesome trail of absolute carnage. Now, only the towering alpha remained. Gathering his aura, Råkan channeled all his power into a single, lethal strike, smashing right into the monster's skull. But the impact rang hollow. The beast's ridiculous defense absorbed the blow. His ultimate attack felt like a mere mosquito bite to the giant boss. The pathetic damage only sent the creature into a raging frenzy. It grabbed Råkan like a rag doll and slammed him brutally into the ground, unleashing a storm of devastating punches. Coughing up blood, he barely managed to slip out of its lethal grip. "You absolute bastard! I will drag you to hell with me." Råkan's eyes flared with crimson killing intent, but reality kicked in. Time for the ultimate secret technique. The legendary 36 stratagems, where running for your life is the supreme choice. The enraged beast stood bewildered for a second, processing the sudden retreat. Then, with a deafening roar, it tore through the wind, absolutely determined to turn our hero into minced meat. Surveying the ruined village, Råkan spotted his only salvation. A single, crumbling wooden house remained standing. The monster let out a chilling, sadistic laugh as it slowly crept inside, and sure enough, the former king was hiding in the shadows, cursing the beast for shattering 4 of his precious ribs. Before he could even catch his breath, the looming shadow of the boss enveloped him. But Råkan grinned. He masterfully baited the brainless brute into smashing every single load-bearing pillar, dancing around the massive club like a ghost. Creak! Snap! The entire ceiling collapsed, burying the roaring beast under tons of crushing debris. Meanwhile, Råkan smoothly dashed out the back door. This was his signature environmental combat mastery. Ding, ding, ding. A cascade of golden system windows flooded his vision, showering him with epic titles and massive loot. Victorious, our hero strutted back into Pocket City. However, reality was a bitter pill. He knew his current stats were nowhere near enough to annihilate the treacherous 𝒂𝒏𝒌 guild just yet. Swallowing his pride, he tossed some hard-earned coins to the training grounds manager. It was time for a brutal reality check. As the ancient martial arts proverb goes, "I fear not the man who practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who practiced 1 kick 10,000 times." Råkan savagely pulverized the wooden training dummies. He knew this secret method would forcefully squeeze hidden stat points out of a beginner's body. While the arrogant high-level players snickered and mocked him from afar, his strength stat was quietly skyrocketing. The system nervously chimed in, suggesting he should focus on completing basic quests to level up properly. But the foolish system didn't understand the mindset of an apex predator. Råkan employed an extreme stat-maxing strategy, completely ignoring his base level. Once his foundational stats hit an absolute breaking point, speed running to level 100 would only take a few days of mindless grinding. Exactly 10 days later, boom, he had completely demolished every single wooden dummy in the yard. His base attributes, like dexterity, strength, and explosive speed, had all breached the maximum beginner limits. Now, it was finally time to farm some experience points. Just as he turned to leave, the grumpy manager blocked his path. Rokan braced himself for a massive property damage fine. But, plot twist, the old man was utterly mesmerized by his demonic dedication. With a sly grin, he guided Rokan to a hidden, underground training facility. The room was packed with premium, high-grade dummies that moved with terrifying human precision. A wicked smile stretched across Rokan's face. He was absolutely thrilled. Even though these enchanted constructs could beat him half to death, this was the ultimate playground to satisfy his bloodlust and forcefully awaken his potential. Fast forward 5 bloody days. The heavy iron doors slowly groaned open. Every single elite dummy had been reduced to splinters. Rokan emerged from the shadows, radiating the terrifying aura of an absolute monster. His greatest spoil of war, the passive skill Mental Fortitude. It boosted all stats by a staggering 50% when his health dropped below 5%. This single, overpowered skill would be his ultimate trump card when dancing on the razor's edge of death. His next destination? The bustling metropolis of Catan City. Cut to a loud tavern, where Rokan was matching drinks with the legendary Berserker Guildmaster. Impressed by the young man's unyielding aura, the veteran warrior offered him a rare opportunity. He granted him the right to awaken the Berserker class. Ding! The system alerted him that his level had crashed back to 1. But the catch? All his monstrously grinded stats were perfectly preserved. Why choose this reckless path? Because that bastard Odin never walked without a loyal army of guards. And the Berserker class thrives on chaos, stacking insane bonus stats when fighting against multiple enemies. Furthermore, their signature awakening skill massively amplifies all combat numbers. It was hands down the most broken class for a player with already maxed out base attributes. But the most crucial reason of all? That double S-rank scum took his life once. Now, he was going to mount Odin's severed head on a spike. The very thought made his blood boil with rage. Sprinting straight to the city bank, he aggressively took out a colossal loan. He didn't care about the astronomical interest rates. He slammed the gold on the counter to instantly unlock every single advanced Berserker skill. The instructor warned him they would cost a fortune, but Rokan just glared at him. Save your breath. I'm buying the entire catalog. Checking his status window, he admired his new godly arsenal. Axe Mastery, Flash Step, and the terrifying Battle Cry. But the crown jewel was the Berserk mode, a taboo skill that ignited his very life force to unleash world-ending destructive power. It was a match made in heaven for his savage, blood-soaked fighting style. Now, the only thing left to do was grind experience like an absolute maniac. His first, self-assigned mission? Hunting down the fearsome hobgoblins. But society is cruel to a level 1 noob. He searched the plaza for hours, finding 0 party members willing to carry him. Instead, a heavy armored knight, at level 25, swaggered over to mock his pathetic level. Despite technically being at the bottom of the food chain, Rokan radiated absolute boss energy, provoking the knight into a blind rage. A solo duel was declared. At a glance, this mismatched battle drew a massive, whispering crowd. Among them stood Junho's elite party, watching with keen interest. Clad from head to toe in gleaming steel, the furious knight charged forward like an unstoppable runaway train. Whoosh! Rokan casually sidestepped the clumsy strike. In the same breath, he delivered a heaven-shattering punch right into the knight's arrogant face. Crack! The premium level 22 helmet shattered into countless pieces. The fool had no idea. Rokan's hellish underground training had pushed his invisible base stats to rival a level 50 veteran. This effortless, one-hit humiliation completely stunned the crowd. Witnessing true absolute power, Junho's squad instantly begged to party up with the monstrous rookie. Their destination? The dreaded orc camp. With the captain at level 35 and his 2 allies at 32, they were the perfect escort team for this bloodbath. The 4-man squad swiftly arrived at the border of the brutal dead forest. Trusting their high-level survival skills, our reincarnated king casually strolled behind them like a boss on vacation, and as expected from elite mercenaries. Their tracking abilities were razor-sharp. It didn't take long to pinpoint the vile monster stronghold. Beyond this point lay the unforgiving territory of the orcs. The perimeter was crawling with hyper-vigilant patrol guards. Sensing the danger, the knight signaled his support mage. A chunk of raw, bloody meat was hurled right into the center of the path. The moment the greedy sentries turned their ugly heads toward the distraction, our squad melted into the shadows behind them. Slipping through the shadows with absolute ease, the party continued their stealthy advance toward the hidden back entrance. Suddenly, the knight signaled everyone to halt. The enemy had already discovered the gate and stationed a heavy guard detail right at the threshold. With their cover blown, there was only one path left: total annihilation. The female mage instantly cast a silence spell, aiming it straight at the demonic sentry. Meanwhile, the knight gripped his weapon tight and charged forward like a roaring beast. In a flash, the monster was taken down effortlessly, completely unable to alert its comrades inside. The mission was a total success, and Rokan handed over the agreed-upon gold coins to the mercenaries. As he bid them farewell and vanished into the shadows, the trio could not help but gossip. Why would he walk straight into the jaws of death? After all, the incident earlier in the marketplace was started by that massive knight using a preemptive strike skill. Normally, under the system laws, the one who attacks first is temporarily granted self-defense status, allowing them to harvest experience points by defeating their opponent. But somehow, this guy completely bypassed the ironclad rules and knocked the knight out cold with a single, devastating punch. It was painfully obvious that Rokan possessed monstrous strength, yet he was deliberately hiding his true power by staying at level 1. Meanwhile, deep inside the monster camp, the orcs were utterly dumbfounded. A puny human had dared to trespass into the heart of their territory. Rokan stood tall like an immovable mountain at the center, demanding a one-on-one duel with their absolute strongest warrior. What the monsters did not realize was that this very challenge was a calculated trap. By invoking the sacred law of combat, he forced them into an honorable duel to protect their pride. Rokan's true objective in entering this death trap was to claim a legendary tier title. In this brutal forest, the orcs were renowned as a race born for the battlefield. However, a sacred duel here guaranteed incredibly massive rewards from the system. But that was not all. This territory was the ultimate hunting ground, allowing consecutive death matches without any fear of outside interference. Step up right now. Who among you is the strongest? His roar shook the heavens. But the moment a monstrous opponent twice his size stepped forward, even the veteran Rokan felt a chill down his spine. He never expected to cross paths with the level 70 orc chieftain so soon. Compared to that towering behemoth's stats, his current level 1 avatar was nothing but a fragile ant. Rokan cursed his own carelessness for rushing in blind. But before the chieftain could strike, a booming voice halted the execution. It was Carlo, the 4th-ranked elite warrior of the tribe. He wanted to test this arrogant human's strength as a gruesome entrance exam. Hearing this, Rokan secretly sighed in relief, but instantly trembled with burning rage at himself. To think he, a former supreme ranker, actually felt glad to face a weaker opponent. With such a cowardly mindset, he could never reclaim his former glory and crush his arch-enemy, Odin. His eyes blazed with renewed determination as he pointed his weapon straight at the chieftain and boldly declared, "I prophesize that today you will meet your absolute end by my hands." Carlo, thoroughly enraged by this utter disrespect, gripped his battle axe and charged with murderous intent. But Rokan sidestepped the heavy blow with phantom-like speed, and with just a single, explosive counterattack, sent the massive orc flying through the air. Only then did the elite warrior realize the human's monstrous power. Knowing raw strength would not work, the beast immediately unleashed its signature skill, Battle Cry. A deafening roar shattered the air, and as expected, Rokan felt his status window flash, dropping all his combat stats by 10%. Seizing the opening, Carlo fiercely lunged forward for the kill. But the foolish monster had no idea that such a minor debuff meant nothing to a battle-hardened veteran. Rokan masterfully used his smaller hitbox and insane agility to weave through the deadly strikes. Closing the distance with terrifying precision, he delivered an earth-shattering kick that forced the beast to its knees. Exploiting the monster's momentary stun, the main character instantly activated his battle axe skill, bringing down a catastrophic strike. The full power blow obliterated the enemy on the spot. Immediately, golden system alerts flooded his vision, announcing he had unlocked a legendary tier achievement. With the godlike stat boost this title promised, Rokan felt absolutely confident that he could butcher that brainless orc chieftain. However, A second system message caused his confident smirk to completely vanish. The legendary title and all its stat points were currently locked. They would only be granted after he fully completed the Warrior's Honor questline. All rewards were strictly pending. Just then, the towering chieftain stepped into the bloody arena, his mountain-like presence declaring that the human had passed the entrance exam. Now, the true final boss stood before him. This time, Rokhan crushed any lingering doubts of defeat. His aura flared as he steadied his racing heart. "I will grant your dying wish, and send you straight to hell, for I am the absolute tyrant king." The moment the deathmatch commenced, Rokhan immediately activated his trump card, the Berserker skill. This forbidden technique massively boosted his base strength for 10 whole minutes. But the heavy price was the rapid deterioration of his own health points. His physical body felt like it was engulfed in hellfire. Blood boiled in his veins, and an explosive, overwhelming power surged forth. The sheer density of his murderous intent actually made the imposing chieftain flinch in hesitation. Before the boss could even brace itself, Rokhan closed the gap like a lightning bolt, violently swinging dual axes aimed straight for its skull. The chieftain barely managed to parry the onslaught and forcefully pushed the human back. But Rokhan instantly triggered his dash skill, teleporting back into the enemy's blind spot and unleashing a relentless hurricane of critical strikes. He did not give the monster a single second to breathe. Despite boasting superior speed and landing an endless barrage that pushed the colossal boss backward, Rokhan's seasoned gamer instinct warned him that this was simply not enough. To pierce through that absurdly thick, iron-like hide, he absolutely needed to land a fatal, defense-ignoring blow. After a calculated exchange of strikes and sharp observation, his eyes finally locked onto the boss's critical weak point. He charged in for the kill, but the monstrous chieftain had anticipated the move, countering with a catastrophic, full-power slam. The earth-shattering impact of that single axe swing completely shattered Rokhan's weapons into metallic dust. Now completely unarmed, his health points plummeted past the critical 30% mark. To make matters worse, his Berserker skill only had 80 seconds left. Seeing this, the chieftain roared with victorious laughter, fully convinced the battle was already won. He mocked the human for acting tough, thinking him nothing more than weak prey. Little did the arrogant monster know, Rokhan had already formulated a flawless, high-risk counter-strategy. The madman's plan was simple. Total, unrelenting frontal assault. Bare-handed, Rokhan threw himself right into the beast's domain, raining down desperate, bone-crushing blows. He purposefully soaked up massive damage from the chieftain's attacks, completely abandoning defense to land his own devastating counters. Finally, the system flashed red. Health dropped below 10%. The orc chieftain sneered with bloody malice. He raised his massive blade high to execute the final strike. But right at the precipice of death, when Rokhan's health hit exactly 5%, the hidden passive of his legendary title awakened. The indomitable will effect activated, granting him an insane 50% boost to all combat stats for 30 seconds. Like a sleeping dragon violently awakening, Rokhan's suffocating aura of bloodlust erupted into the heavens. Intoxicated by the absolute power coursing through him, he launched himself forward, completely ignoring the fact that the chieftain had desperately activated his iron skin defense skill. All defensive walls crumbled before Rokhan's tyrannical momentum and explosive, godly strength. Ding! The system chimed as the boss's defensive weapon was utterly pulverized into oblivion. The mighty orc chieftain had been officially vanquished. As the massive boss dissolved into glowing pixels, Rokhan offered a final nod of respect, acknowledging him as a truly magnificent warrior. Just as he struck a badass pose to assert dominance over the surviving horde, a cold realization hit him like a truck. The Berserker skill was still fully active, and his health bar was violently ticking down toward zero. He almost died to his own buff. Panicking, Rokhan frantically chugged 2 massive health potions to stabilize his critical condition. The very next second, a golden cascade of system notifications exploded in his vision, relentlessly announcing the mountain of legendary loot he had just claimed. Rokhan laughed like a maniac, gripping a scavenged axe and demanding the next challenger step up. But to his absolute shock, the bloodthirsty orcs dropped to their knees, revering him as an honorary orc warrior for slaying their absolute strongest. Checking the territorial rules, he realized his combat rights here were completely revoked. No one left was deemed a worthy opponent by the system. Rokhan gritted his teeth in extreme frustration, kicking himself for miscalculating and farming the final boss way too early. He just lost the ultimate grinding spot, but he quickly brushed it off. There were countless other ways for a veteran to power level. Besides, the golden trade-off was that he now held absolute authority to command the entire orc tribe at will. Teleporting back to the bustling city, the main character eagerly opened his inventory to appraise his hard-earned loot. He never expected that with just 2 legendary duels. Our main character skyrocketed to level 18. At this insane pace, hitting level 30 would be an absolute breeze. But first things first, he needed to acquire his second skill. Nearby, a bald NPC sliced a massive chunk of meat perfectly in half with just a single dagger strike. This was the legendary one-hit butchering skill, and our overpowered hero wanted it immediately. Staring at the mountain of flesh, his gamer brain started calculating. Selling prepped monster meat would rake in massive amounts of premium resources. Next on his checklist was the first aid ability. The system guide strictly warned him that only pristine materials could be used for bandages. Sure, the HP recovery rate was pretty pathetic at first, but every true gamer knows its real value. It would save him an absolute fortune on health potions. Meanwhile, he geared up with a top-tier battle axe. This beautifully upgraded weapon was a trophy snatched right from a defeated orc warrior. Fully equipped and radiating power, he finally set out to crush the main scenario. He stepped into the dungeon's underground sewers, immediately gagging at the putrid stench. He had to pinch his nose because the toxic odor was absolutely overwhelming. But this was a mandatory cleaning quest to farm rat tails, so he forced himself to endure the nightmare. His strategy was simple: annihilate everything as fast as inhumanly possible. Just a few steps into the darkness, a mutated rat completely covered in grotesque tumors appeared. It was utterly revolting. Without a second of hesitation, the beast lunged at him ferociously. But with a single, devastating swing, he cleaved the monster clean in half. Hearing the slaughter, a massive tidal wave of rodents swarmed out. A wicked grin spread across his face, saving him the hassle of hunting them down. In a flash of steel, he eradicated the entire horde, easily looting dozens of tails. But mere mobs were not his true target. His eyes locked onto the level 23 Plague Rat King. The boss growled menacingly, but with just a few god-tier combos, he casually sliced off the royal tail. Who would have thought the beast had a hidden poison breath attack? Just a tiny splash of venom grazed his arm, sending his health points plummeting rapidly for 10 agonizing seconds. But for a veteran returner, this was barely a scratch. He instantly activated his battle cry skill. A shockwave of pure dominance erupted, instantly slicing all of the boss's stats right in half. With explosive speed, he dashed forward. His heavy axe tore through the monster's flesh, ripping away a chunk of its stomach as it shrieked in agony. But shockingly, this vile boss possessed a regeneration passive. Driven mad by bloodlust, the creature charged. Yet, by perfectly chaining his axe arts with an ultra-fast blink skill, he effortlessly executed the dungeon boss. The loot drop included a premium antidote, alongside the ominous orb of disaster. Returning to the safe zone, he tossed the rat tails to a guard to claim his well-earned EXP. But the moment the NPC laid eyes on the dark orb, his face drained of all color in absolute terror. He flat-out refused to touch the heavily cursed artifact. He begged our hero to find the Grand Mage immediately for purification, while also suggesting he take a serious bath, because that sewer stench was a critical hit to the nose. Following the guard's frantic directions, he arrived at an intimidating magical tower, practically vibrating with heavy defensive enchantments. Stepping inside, he locked eyes with a bald spellcaster deep in research. Bypassing all basic greetings, the old man rudely commanded him to hit the showers first. Our stubborn player refused to budge, forcing the exasperated wizard to snatch the dark orb and shove a glowing purification potion into his hands. The moment the magical liquid touched his lips, the plague debuff shattered, fully restoring his vitality. After a quick magical appraisal, the old man gasped. This very gem was the core of the infectious plague that had twisted those sewer rats into abominations. But the terrifying truth went much deeper than that. Those infected vermin were crawling through the dark alleys, carrying a biochemical weapon meant to wipe out the entire capital. The horrific plan was to decimate the slums first, before unleashing hell upon the nobility. It would have triggered a server-wide catastrophe before anyone noticed. Millions of players would have been dragged into a nightmare-tier survival questline. Realizing the apocalyptic stakes, the wizard panicked. He rushed off to warn the Royal Guard captain to contain the outbreak, but not before commanding our hero to return in exactly 2 days. Left standing alone, he pondered his next move to maximize his gains. Suddenly, a massive golden system message flashed across the sky. Thanks to an anonymous player's god-tier intervention, the catastrophic plague event had been permanently deleted from the server. He smirked, realizing his actions had just shattered the game's timeline. By wiping out that global quest chain, he had completely monopolized the path to the main scenario. A devilish grin crossed his face. He decided to aggressively exploit this 2-day waiting period before meeting the mage again, kicking off his next hidden objective. His destination? A spine-chilling, forsaken graveyard reeking of death. Any noob player would just walk past this empty wasteland. But with his future knowledge, he saw right through the illusion. Bingo! The legendary artifact he was hunting for lay right in the dirt. It was the prosthetic leg of the Enlightened One. This was the ultimate key to a notoriously difficult hidden dungeon. But if you screwed up the activation sequence, the loot vanished forever. Instead of handing it back to the ghost NPC like a fool, he tracked down an ancient tombstone with a perfectly shaped indentation. The moment he snapped the metallic limb into place, the ground violently shook. The system immediately rewarded his genius with the Talent Seeker title. This incredible buff shattered his perception limits, allowing his eyes to spot invisible treasures effortlessly. But the second he crossed the threshold, the massive stone doors slammed shut behind him. It was a deathmatch setup. He either cleared the dungeon or died trying. A cold sweat broke out as he remembered his fatal weakness against phantom-type enemies. If he managed to crawl out of this grave alive, he swore to recruit a gorgeous mage companion to handle spiritual magic damage. Suddenly, the heavy silence was broken by the terrifying sound of rattling bones. An endless sea of level 26 undead skeletons flooded the corridor. Individually, these brittle bone bags were absolute trash against his battle axe. However, their overwhelming numbers were suffocating, forcing him to unleash his explosive area of effect, strike skill to shatter the entire front line. The system notifications rained down, showering him with a massive 100 bonus stat points. The sheer rush of leveling up endlessly like a god was an absolute dopamine overload. Staring at his skyrocketing stats, he locked in a brutal new objective: hit level 30 before his 2-day timer ran out. After hours of mercilessly grinding, through the endless waves of cannon fodder, the final boss finally stepped out, an imposing level 30 skeleton knight. Yet, this supposedly terrifying dungeon boss fell apart with just one horizontal slash. He laughed arrogantly, swearing he could have killed it by flicking a booger at it. The golden aura of leveling up flashed again as he hit 29. The cursed dungeon was finally swept entirely clean of all life. He had been a relentless grinding machine for 2 solid days, spawn-trapping the monsters the very second they tried to revive. Aside from the massive stat explosion and mountains of gold coins, the ultimate loot drop was a highly coveted piece of knight's armor. But looking at its incredibly trashy design, he scoffed and decided to auction it off immediately. He planned to reinvest that cash instantly, while also selling the coordinates of this hidden farming spot for maximum profit. Desperate guilds looking to power level their rookies would pay a premium. They would be swarming this exact location like mindless ants. But before expanding his wealth, he teleported back to his appointment with the Grand Mage. The old man sighed, revealing the royal guards had scoured the city but found absolutely zero trace of the masterminds. Our hero smirked internally, silently praising those bastards from the Fallen Disciples faction. They had covered their tracks flawlessly. In the original timeline, players spent months trying to stop their dark rituals. But this time, our overpowered regressor had shattered their master plan on day 1. Interrupting his thoughts, the mage presented a glowing artifact to scan the environment's memories. This was none other than the legendary Earth Orb. Pulsing with dense, primordial earthen energy, it hovered in the air. While useless as a socket gem, its unique magical properties were absolute cheat tier. When activated, it allowed the user to peer directly into the past. Rokan's unique skill allowed him to monitor specific zones. It was the ultimate hunting hack. And now, it was time to hunt down the true mastermind. But the quest requirements were brutal. He needed the fresh blood of an orc warrior and a beastman. Getting it by force? Practically impossible, especially since Rokan held the legendary Honorable Orc Warrior title. His affinity with the green-skinned race was maxed out. Losing that reputation would be a massive setback. The very next day, our main character casually strolled into the orc stronghold. As expected, the monsters greeted him like an old comrade. But when Rokan smoothly asked for a quick blood donation, they instantly refused. The pride of an orc was absolute. A true warrior only sheds blood on the battlefield. Bleeding anywhere else was the ultimate disgrace. Realizing diplomacy was a dead end, Rokan smiled. It was time for a more villainous approach. Step 1. Borrow a standard orc axe. Step 2. Infiltrate the beastman lair and execute a guard. When the beastman patrols found their dead comrade, they saw the orc weapon and completely lost their minds. Those green pigs will pay for this. Rokan knew the lore perfectly. Beastmen and orcs were mortal enemies, locked in an endless blood feud over the forest's territory. He was simply lighting the fuse for an all-out war. It was the most efficient way to clear his quest. Returning to the orc castle, he repeated the trick. He casually dropped a beastman's sword, framing them for an attack. The bait worked flawlessly. That night, the furious orc army marched straight into beastman territory. Meanwhile, 2 low-level human players were hiding in the bushes. They were practically shaking in their boots at the monstrous army. One of them was actually a guy Rokan had trashed back in the city. Seeing Rokan leading the mighty orc forces triggered his trauma. His face turned completely pale. "We need to run, now!" But it was too late. A massive orc had already crept up behind them, listening to every word. The 2 pathetic players were dragged out into the open. The defeated player recognized Rokan immediately. He begged and pleaded for mercy, desperately trying to use their past connection. But our ruthless main character? He didn't even blink. He let the orcs pummel them into the dirt. And just like that, the chaotic turf war began. The forest became a blood-soaked meat grinder. And the ultimate winner? Rokan, of course. He comfortably looted dozens of blood vials from the fallen. A twisted grin spread across his face as he absorbed the beautiful chaos. But the surviving beastman noticed the laughing human and charged. Rokan's blood boiled with excitement. He gripped his axe, diving straight into the slaughter. "Come here, you mere mobs!" He cut them down like weeds. But mere blood wasn't his true goal. He was hunting the beastman chieftain, a terrifying boss monster, leagues above the orc leader. Unlike orcs, beastmen didn't care about honorable one-on-one duels. Fighting him solo would be a nightmare. Using the orc army to drain the boss's HP was a masterstroke. Right on cue, the colossal chieftain crashed into the battlefield. The ground shattered beneath its feet as it locked targets with the new orc leader. It completely dominated the duel. Seeing his opening, Rokan exploded forward. The boss tried to dodge, but Rokan activated his smite skill. He struck the monster's critical weak point with devastating force. The massive chieftain coughed up blood and collapsed. Before it could even breathe, Rokan's blade was at its throat. One final roar echoed out before its head was completely severed. A sweet notification chimed. "Level up!" But that wasn't all. He unlocked the rare achievement, Ruler of the Harsh Forest. His stamina and speed instantly jumped by 10 points, plus a massive 5% stat boost within forest zones. And because of his brilliant double-agent scheme, the system rewarded him with the Dark Veil title, a god-tier passive for hiding his identity and executing assassinations. With the boss dead, the orcs claimed total dominance over the forest. Rokan casually returned to the old mage's hideout. The non-playable character was absolutely speechless at his impossible clear time. With the rare materials secured, the mage immediately started brewing. In an instant, an upgraded potion was crafted. "Deliver this to Matthew," the mage ordered. This was the final quest chain in the city of Khatun. Before heading out, Rokan activated his new Dark Veil title. His appearance morphed completely. He had a secret rendezvous with a warrior player to sell exclusive dungeon intel. Once the dungeon opened, the warrior handed over the cash. 50 pure gold coins. No standard guild quest could ever dream of paying out this much. With his pockets full and quests cleared, it was time to move on. Next destination, the legendary city of Trinsic. It was a brutal, grueling trek. He had already cleared 2/3 of the journey. "Just half a day left," he muttered. But in this game, dying meant respawning at the starting point. Suddenly, a massive shockwave erupted right behind him. 3 notorious player killers emerged from the shadows. Their crimson-red names proved they were bloodthirsty murderers. They hunted players for their hard-earned gold and gear. But little did they know, Rokan was bored out of his mind. His hands were practically itching for a fight. Seeing the ecstatic, psychotic grin on Rokan's face caught them off guard. They genuinely thought the poor guy had lost his mind from fear. Flipping the switch to player kill mode, the bandits lunged. The massive tank charged first, swinging a gigantic axe aimed right at Rokan's skull. Using his blink skill, Rokan dodged like a ghost and closed the distance. He went for a lethal counterattack, but suddenly, a powerful force violently repelled his strike. Rokan's eyes narrowed. A Guardian Knight's reflection shield. Instantly, The second assassin dashed in from the blind spot. Rokon twisted his body to evade the deadly slash, but a shower of arrows rained down from the third sniper. The synchronized combo finally landed a hit. Thankfully, Rokan's monstrous defense stats absorbed the damage. He smirked. Their teamwork was actually solid. The archer zoned him, while the knight acted as an unbreakable wall. They stood in a perfect triangle formation, covering each other's weaknesses. But Rokan's combat intelligence was unmatched. He pulled out his dual tomahawk axes. Time to break your little formation and peel you apart one by one. Without hesitation, he hurled both axes straight at the shield tank. The sheer impact sent the heavy knight flying backward. The bulky attacker rushed in to cover the gap, but Rokan sidestepped effortlessly. In that split second, he transformed his weapon for the killing blow. The demonic orc axe descended with brutal force. A devastating final strike painted the ground in crimson, just as he calculated. Suddenly, an arrow pierced the wind, aiming straight for his head. Too slow. If you wanted to shoot, you should have done it while your friend was still breathing. Looks like your game over is happening ahead of schedule. Ignoring the desperate barrage of arrows, Rokon triggered his blink and strike skills. His grip tightened on the axe as he unleashed a monstrous cleave. Both of the archer's arms were severed in an instant to stop his annoying attacks. But in his bloodlust, Rokon forgot one crucial detail. The shield-bearing bandit was still completely unscathed. Without warning, a massive blast of freezing ice erupted from the shield. It blasted toward our main character with an ear-splitting roar, but the bandit made a fatal miscalculation. Relying solely on his overwhelming physical stats, Rokan shattered the ultimate attack with ease. He ended the bandit's life with one merciless crush. When he turned his gaze back to the battlefield, the armless archer had already fled for his life. Rokan scanned the area and locked his eyes on a colossal boulder nearby. At that moment, the archer was sprinting in pure, unfiltered terror. He pushed his legs to the absolute limit to escape, but the moment he glanced back, a giant shadow had already eclipsed the sun. The massive boulder was right on top of him. He only had time to spit out a single curse. Then came the sickening crunch of shattering bones and crushed flesh. Next time, think twice before looking down on an apex predator. Oh wait, there won't be a next time for you. The bloodbath finally ended. Rokon let out a booming laugh, realizing that player killing was infinitely more thrilling than hunting those brainless monsters. Even better, the loot these scumbags dropped was incredibly valuable. Rokon casually swept up the glowing items and set his sights forward. The majestic kingdom loomed in the distance. Just as expected, the city was thriving with elite players. Every single person here had breached level 40. Even the local mage guild towered like a fortress of magic, although the number of actual mages was far too small for such a massive tower. But that made sense for a high-tier class. The higher the level, the rarer they became. The aura radiating from the players here was entirely different. Some had even awakened, their second job advancements. Right now, Rokan was standing inside a premium magical artifact shop. The merchant eagerly presented his newest, most exclusive stock. It was the legendary Recall Scroll. This was an absolute must-have item for hardcore player killers. It granted the user the power to instantly teleport across the map. You could bind it to any of 5 custom-marked locations. However, the system restricted its use during active combat. Despite that massive tactical advantage, the price tag was completely outrageous. A staggering 5 gold coins per scroll. Suddenly, the system interface flashed, reminding him of his pending quest. He grabbed the potion and the old mage's recommendation letter to hand over to Matteo. Matteo scanned the parchment, his eyes narrowing in silent calculation. He looked at the arrogant rookie standing before him with utter disdain. But he couldn't just ignore a direct referral from the veteran mage. Reluctantly, Matteo assigned him a preliminary quest. It was supposed to be a simple test of his abilities. His mission: track down the goblin witch doctor's divine elixir deep within the jungle. But thanks to his past life, Rokon knew the dark truth. This NPC was notoriously wicked. Once a player engaged with this goblin witch doctor questline, Matteo would ruthlessly demand an endless list of ultra-rare materials. These items had absolutely nothing to do with the main scenario. He was just exploiting players to fund his personal research. Normally, helpless hunters couldn't abandon the main questline, so they had no choice but to grind out these miserable fetch quests. But Rokan was a returner. The memories of his past life painted a clear roadmap of Matteo's greedy demands. If I have to make the trip anyway, I'll just hoard every single item in advance. Why play by the system's rules and suffer? With his inventory fully stocked and preparations complete, it was time to flip the script and shock this arrogant NPC. Back at the lab, Matteo was deeply engrossed in researching a new antidote. Bang! A heavy sack crashed onto his desk, shattering the silence. Matteo flinched, his eyes widening in absolute shock. Every single impossible item he planned to demand later was already sitting right in front of him. After a long, stunned silence, the NPC surrendered the quest rewards. But he immediately tried to trap Rokan with another set of grueling tasks. Rokan smirked. So, the snake finally shows its fangs. Giving him the next tier of quests, this quickly proved Matteo had been desperate all along. His hidden agenda was painfully obvious. Furthermore, the next required item was the lizard man's heart. This wasn't something you could just casually buy at the auction house. As much as Rokan wanted to speedrun this entire questline, he had to face reality. The lizard man's heart only dropped from a brutal level 80 boss monster. With his current stats, challenging that beast was practically suicide. So, he tossed that quest into the background for now. His primary focus shifted back to the main storyline. In his previous life, a random player had stumbled upon a legendary clue. They claimed the hero's statue was literally pointing toward a hidden legacy. Back then, the entire server laughed at the theory. But years later, it was proven to be an absolute fact. Rokan recalled the secret coordinates: 1123, L200, and 130. It was a literal treasure map. Walk 1123 steps in the pointed direction. Then pivot left for exactly 200 steps. Finally, march straight ahead for another 130 paces. Utilizing his physically enhanced vision, Rokan scanned the ancient ruins. Bingo! He spotted the exact stone brick, serving as the trigger mechanism. The moment his fingers pressed the switch, the earth trembled. A massive stone wall groaned open, revealing the gaping maw of a hidden dungeon. Rokan stepped inside, but his returner instincts screamed a warning. A colossal, trap-triggered boulder was already hurtling toward him. The sheer mass of the stone sphere was terrifying. Even with his monstrous base stats, Rokan was getting pushed back. He had no choice but to ignite his self-buffing skills. Channeling every ounce of his raw power, he finally forced the boulder to a grinding halt. Reality hit him like a truck. This wasn't just some secret cave. This was the infamous hero's trial dungeon. He would have to survive a gauntlet of lethal traps to claim the ultimate reward. The system announced the Level 2 trial. Objective: safely navigate the corridor and reach the door at the far end. Rokan picked up a chunk of rock and tossed it forward. Instantly, a storm of hidden arrows reduced the rock to dust. Just as I thought, a test of intellect. Without a thief class to disarm the pressure plates, the system expected players to meticulously calculate their steps to survive this deceptive trap. But cheap tricks won't work on me. Rokan's eyes glowed fiercely. He stacked his berserker enhancement skill with blink. His movement speed skyrocketed by a mind-bending 100%. He launched himself forward like a human cannonball. Even with godlike speed, dodging every single projectile was impossible. Sharp pain flared as the arrow rain tore into his flesh. But Rokan gritted his teeth and charged blindly into the storm. He swung his demonic orc axe, deflecting the fatal blows in a flurry of sparks. With one final, gravity-defying leap, he crashed onto the safe zone. He had violently shattered the trial's mechanics. He fell to his knees, gasping for air as his stamina bottomed out. Blaring red system alerts warned him of his critical health status. He slammed a health potion, but the system forced a 10-minute cooldown for full recovery. After catching his breath, the dungeon initiated the next phase. The hero's trial of temptation. Rokan's memories flashed back to the horrifying rumors. It was a realm of high-tier psychological warfare. Phantoms of breathtaking beauties, mountains of glittering gold, or lavish feasts would try to break the challenger's mind. But it was a completely pointless effort against our main character. He possessed a mythical rank title. The title granted absolute immunity to all negative mental status effects. The illusions shattered like glass before they even reached him. Rokan strolled across the bridge of temptation like he was taking a walk in the park. He arrived at the Level 4 corridor, only to find a dead end. Relying on his gaming instincts, he traced his hands along the stone surface. There had to be a hidden mechanism built into the wall. Click! A concealed revolving door suddenly spun out of nowhere. It whipped around with such insane velocity that it launched Rokan face first into the dirt. Damn it. But the humiliating faceplant was totally worth it, confirming he had conquered the hero's trial. Resting majestically on an ancient pedestal was the ultimate prize, the sealed helmet of the legendary Lion King. Instantly, a golden light washed over his vision. A hidden SSS-rank system quest had just been triggered. The objective: collect the scattered pieces of the Lion King's armor set. Rokan's heart pounded with pure excitement. If he could assemble the full set, his defensive stats would shatter the game's limits, turning him into an invincible walking fortress. Intermediate quest cleared. The system message chimed. Within moments, Rokan materialized outside. As he reviewed his next objective, a massive shift occurred. The great lion statue in the plaza was crumbling to dust. This was the absolute proof. The hidden dungeon had completely vanished from the server, and Rokan was the sole player who had claimed its treasures. After a full day of grinding those tedious, romantic side quests, the payoff was absolutely astronomical. Massive experience points flooded his status window. But the true prize was a breathtaking artifact: the Emerald Tear Necklace, a legendary treasure containing the pure tears of a maiden. Its effects were god tier. It completely restored vitality after a berserk state and instantly stopped all bleeding. Suddenly, a global server announcement echoed across the sky. A massive new update was going live. But Rokan only cared about one thing: the housing system had finally launched. Without a single second of hesitation, he dumped his entire fortune. He aggressively bought out every single 3-room, 2-story estate in the Prime Zone because he possessed the memories of the future. He knew exactly what chaos would follow this update. Real estate prices were about to skyrocket to the heavens. The server's supply could never meet the explosive demand of the players. Real estate was the ultimate, foolproof long-term investment. Sure, he had to pay the monthly maintenance fees, but as the absolute monopolist of these premium properties, the profit margins would have him swimming in oceans of gold. Rokan grinned like an absolute villain as he signed the final deed. He was about to become filthy rich. Originally, he planned to show a little mercy and just double the rent, but factoring in the future inflation of the game's economy, he ruthlessly decided to triple the price. The top-tier guilds would soon desperately need these mansions. They needed safe havens to store their guild stones and flex their absolute dominance. Pathetic little shacks wouldn't satisfy their massive egos. Every single property he snagged fit their premium standards perfectly. The trap is perfectly set. Now, let's hunt down some fresh prey. Rokan swaggered into the dense, ominous forest. In his past life, this zone was infamous as a lizardman breeding ground. But right now, the player base hadn't even discovered its existence. To speed up the slaughter, he unleashed his battle roar skill. The shockwave ripped through the trees. Instantly, 2 massive lizardmen went absolutely feral and charged at him. But Rokan's blade danced in a deadly rhythm. He obliterated them in seconds, cleanly severing their tails. The trick was slicing these tails off while the beasts were still breathing. If he sold these fresh parts to the butcher, the gold reward would be heavily multiplied. Rokan continued his ruthless massacre through the forest. In a flash, he slaughtered over a dozen of the scaly beasts. A golden pillar of light washed over him as his level skyrocketed. But the celebration was cut short. A 5-man player-killer squad stepped out of the shadows, eyes gleaming with greed. They wanted his loot. Rokan's blood boiled with absolute excitement. He recognized these absolute scumbags instantly. In the future, they would become the core elite of Odin's army. That leader, Helios, he would become the 12th-ranked player on the server, and a top 9 executive of the legendary Ragnarok Guild. Rokan was going to crush them. He would beat them so flawlessly they would have nightmares about logging in. Any last words before I send you to hell? His sheer arrogance snapped their remaining patience. The squad roared in blinding fury, launching an all-out coordinated strike. But their bloodlust instantly turned into agonizing screams. Rokan's axe flashed like a thunderbolt, tearing through their front line in a single, devastating strike. Helios stood frozen in absolute shock. His squad was decimated. But this monster still had the audacity to talk trash. Without missing a beat, Rokan triggered his explosive fire skill. A blistering wave of flames erupted, blasting the mage backward. Before Helios could even recover his footing, Rokan lunged forward like an apex predator, his battle axe swinging with lethal intent. Helios desperately blocked, pushing Rokan away with a frantic barrage of erupting fire pillars. The intense heat left Rokan with severe burn debuffs. Seizing this golden opportunity, Helios poured every ounce of his mana into one final, desperate strike. But with a single, flawless parry, Rokan deflected the entire assault. In his past life, he had clashed with this bastard hundreds of times. every twitch, every spell. Rokhan could read him like an open book, but history had slightly altered. Helios had secretly acquired a terrifying skill far too early. Incinerate. An overwhelming, high-tier fire spell that bypassed all basic defenses. A massive shockwave of pure destructive flames consumed the battlefield. It erased everything in its path, swallowing Rokhan whole. Helios laughed maniacally, convinced he had turned this monstrous opponent into ashes. But he was celebrating way too early. Too slow. Rokhan materialized right through the smoke, the indestructible Lion King's helmet gleaming with absolute dominance. Before Helios could even process his impending doom, Rokhan's axe cleaved through the air, executing him instantly. Another magnificent pillar of golden light descended. The massive experience points pushed Rokhan to yet another level. He looted the corpses, his eyes widening at the treasure trove. These absolute scumbags must have robbed countless low-level newbies blind. To be completely honest, Helios almost had him in that final exchange. Back in his previous life, these player killers were the absolute terror of the hunting grounds. To survive, the weaker players had to form massive alliances just to stand a chance against them. Thinking back, the heroes who finally exterminated these rats, they mostly belonged to the Magic Guild. That monumental victory made them famous across the entire server. But in this timeline, the Magic Guild wouldn't get their moment of glory, because Rokhan was rewriting history. Sensing the approach of enemy reinforcements, Rokhan prepared for a tactical retreat. But before he could take a single step, a glaring teleportation light flashed right behind his back. Without missing a beat, Rokhan spun like a deadly tornado. His axe instantly decapitated the vanguard. His eyes burned with terrifying bloodlust as he provoked the rest of them. "Come at me, all of you!" He didn't care about their numbers or their stats. A quick glance revealed 15 fresh targets. Within mere heartbeats, he had already slaughtered half of their squad. His experience bar was absolutely skyrocketing. Now, it was a deadly showdown against 5 elite archers. They activated heavenly arrows, unleashing a relentless rain of steel aimed straight for his heart. But Rokhan's burst movement skill defied all logic. He dodged every single arrow and butchered them where they stood. As the dust settled, a miraculous drop caught his eye. The invisibility cloak, an ultra-rare artifact with overpowered stealth capabilities that was virtually impossible to farm. These absolute fools really thought they could overwhelm a supreme ranker with mere numbers? What a joke. Suddenly, another massive wave of teleportation lights illuminated the forest. Feeling his stamina running low, Rokhan smirked and threw on the invisibility cloak. Melting perfectly into the shadows, he became an untraceable ghost. From his hiding spot, he eavesdropped on the incoming squad, uncovering a massive secret. The mastermind pulling the strings belonged to the prestigious MB Guild. Their informant had been stalking Rokhan, compiling his combat data. Yet, they still delusionally believed he was just using illegal software. "It has to be a hack," they shouted. How else could he tank intermediate fire spells without a scratch? How did he solo a higher-level squad and deflect a massive arrow barrage with raw mechanics? The MB Guildmaster was foaming at the mouth with blazing rage. He ordered his men to hunt Rokhan down at any cost and retrieve the invisibility cloak. That artifact was a priceless treasure bought straight from a hidden dungeon. And now, his own incompetent men had handed it right to their worst nightmare. Rokhan observed their pathetic scrambling from the shadows. He carved a blood oath into his very soul. He was going to utterly annihilate the MB Guild. Those hypocrites paraded around as the server's righteous protectors, but secretly bankrolled murderous player-killer syndicates. But first, he needed to temper his blade. He needed absolute, overwhelming power to crush their entire organization. Rokhan plunged deeper into the wilderness for some hellish training. He was now locked in a brutal deathmatch with a level 75 mutant Earth Warrior. With its absurd defense and explosive strength, the monster pushed Rokhan to his absolute limits. The clash of power shook the very ground. Finally, Rokhan's blade shattered the beast into polygons. The system instantly flooded his vision with golden text. He had slain his 100th higher-level enemy. The legendary title, Infinite Challenger, was unlocked. The perks were absolutely god-tier. It passively restored 1% of his vitality with every kill. And if he chained kills within a time limit, his critical damage would stack by 1% infinitely. He opened his status window and smirked. Hitting level 50 was just the beginning. Rokhan strode back into the city limits, his eyes set on his second-class advancement. But as he walked, the atmosphere grew heavy. Every single player was staring daggers in his direction. An entire mob had been camping the central plaza, waiting for his return. Instantly, they swarmed him like angry hornets. They demanded he step into a dark alley to settle their little grudge. But our overpowered main character? He did not even flinch. Instead of wasting his breath, he activated a server-wide megaphone item. He casually called for the city guards. The moment his words echoed, 3 heavily armored knights materialized from thin air. These were the Absolute Enforcers level 999 guard NPCs. Their sole purpose was to crush rule breakers with overwhelming force. In this game, players with active player kill statuses were strictly forbidden from roaming safe zones. The city gatekeepers were supposed to block them, but these fools had sneaked in. Now caught in the trap, Rokan finally opened his mouth. He unleashed a barrage of pure mockery, pushing their aggro to the absolute limit. Blinded by rage, one idiot lost his mind and actually charged forward with his weapon drawn. Before his blade could even swing, a guard NPC kicked him straight into the pavement. He was instantly deleted. Rokan smirked like a true villain. "Oh, mighty guards, please deliver justice," he laughed. "And to the rest of you trash, if you want your stolen gear back, I suggest you check the auction house." He had looted every single piece of their equipment, and now he was going to turn their misery into cold, hard cash. This mountain of stolen loot was bound to cause chaos. The black market was going to completely sell out. He planned to list everything at a hilariously cheap price, completely destroying the market value. Watching them scramble to buy back their own gear was going to be priceless. But enough games. It was time to focus on his massive power-up. Rokan headed straight to the Berserker Guild to claim his second-class evolution. Hearing his request, the guildmaster frowned. He strongly advised Rokan to pick a different branching path. "If you walk the exact same path," the master warned, "your current skills will definitely evolve, but your combat style will become terrifyingly rigid." Choosing the pure Berserker route meant abandoning versatility. He would lack utility skills, making it impossible to adapt to unpredictable raid mechanics. It was considered a rookie mistake in the meta. But Rokan just chuckled inwardly. As a regressor, he already knew the hidden truth. The entire player base was completely wrong. Any class could achieve absolute perfection if the player manually customized their skill combinations. Ignoring the useless advice, he firmly locked in his choice. A blinding golden light swallowed the room. He had successfully ascended into a high-tier berserker. The system offered him one of 3 legendary rewards: a bloodthirsty battle axe, a mystical lizard-scale shoulder guard, or a sharply forged heavy sword. The guildmaster gasped in shock. Any normal brute would greedily grab the weapons, but Rokan confidently claimed the lizard-scale armor. This seemingly basic piece of defensive gear possessed a god-tier hidden trait. It could infinitely repair and evolve itself through future upgrades. Loot secured, he immediately accessed the guild shop to purchase 3 game-changing skills. First was a devastating close-quarters execution move, dealing catastrophic damage to grounded enemies. Second was a terrifying gap closer. This hunting skill allowed him to launch himself into the sky and crash down, completely obliterating anyone caught in his impact crater. Finally, he bought the signature move of the Orc Chieftain. It was the exact throwing art that had nearly killed him before. This brutal weapon-tossing skill possessed a unique damage modifier. The physics were totally inverted. The closer he was to his target, the more devastating the impact. For now, his shopping spree was over. He had completely emptied his wallet, since his black market auctions had not processed yet. Fully geared and brimming with aura, he returned to his main questline. He handed over the extremely rare Lizardman blood to the shadowy quest giver. The NPC trembled with absolute ecstasy upon receiving the precious alchemy ingredient. The madman did not even glance back at Rokan. He still had 4 more grueling chain quests to clear. Based on his past life knowledge, the next objective for the mystic fruit was buried deep within the death swamp. Ordinary close combat classes avoided this hellish zone like the plague. The thick, toxic mud completely destroyed mobility. For a heavy-footed berserker, wandering into an area crawling with camouflaged apex predators was basically digital suicide. In his past life, he would have hesitated, but now, he was the true apex predator. A thrill of pure adrenaline surged through his veins. Armed to the teeth, Rokan marched boldly toward the murky wetlands. However, he had barely stepped foot outside the city, when a chorus of furious battle cries echoed behind him. It was the very same guild of trash who had been humiliated by the guards. They had wasted hours camping the border just to ambush him outside the safe zone. An all-out bloodbath was completely unavoidable, but their numbers were absolutely suffocating. they launched an endless tsunami of coordinated attacks, forcing Rokhan into a tactical retreat while deflecting a storm of blades. Dancing on the razor edge of death triggered his gamer instincts. He instantly discovered a broken hidden combo. Fusing his innate roar skill with the Lion King mask, he unleashed a shockwave of supreme dominance. This area of effect debuff shattered their defensive stats and stripped away their combat aura. Seizing the golden window, Rokhan activated his absolute carnage mode. He tore through their front lines like a raging demon. The sheer brutality of his strikes sent shockwaves through the earth. The surviving players were paralyzed with absolute terror. They thought they were hunting a level 30 newbie. Little did they know, this monster had already broken past level 50. His insane growth speed was unprecedented. Rokhan moved like a phantom of death, too fast for their eyes to track, too powerful for their armor to block. Driven to absolute madness, the enemy captain screamed an insane order. He commanded the mage battalion to initiate carpet bombing. Completely abandoning their own vanguard, the crazed mages chanted in unison. Hundreds of blazing pillars of hellfire rained down upon the battlefield. A storm of friendly fire incinerated their own allies. Yet, against the true target, nearly every single spell missed. Rokhan tanked the stray hits with his iron-like flesh, barely feeling a scratch. If those were high-tier magic circles, I would be ash, he calculated coldly. But this is just fireworks. Suddenly, a second magical bombardment lit up the sky. Without hesitation, Rokhan grabbed the dying bodies of his enemies. He used their armored corpses as massive meat shields to block the explosive impact. Still, his stamina gauge was flashing a dangerous crimson. His mind raced like a supercomputer. His mana pool was dangerously low against an army of 100. He had only slaughtered 20 of them so far. It was time to switch to pure mechanical skill to regenerate his mana. But the enemy had adapted. For their third wave, they sent in the elite vanguard. Committing to brutal close-quarters combat, the three strongest rankers synchronized their skills. A blinding celestial chain erupted from the ground, successfully sealing Rokhan's movements. The raid boss had been immobilized. Every single surviving player unleashed their ultimate skills simultaneously. A catastrophic storm of magic and steel converged directly onto his bound body. It looked exactly like a disaster-class boss raid. But as the smoke cleared, something was terribly wrong. From the center of the crater, a maniacal, bone-chilling laughter echoed out. A massive earthquake violently shook the entire swamp. The mob had been cheering in absolute triumph just a second ago, but their smiles instantly froze in horror. With a deafening shatter, the unbreakable golden chain exploded into stardust. Rokhan hovered midair through his leap skill, looking down upon them like a supreme god of war. He crashed down like a falling meteor. With one devastating swing, he cleaved the enemy captain completely in half. A fountain of pixelated blood painted the battlefield. He spun like a cyclone of death, sending bodies flying into the stratosphere. They fell like wheat before a scythe. Ding! The system interface glowed with a glorious golden light. Congratulations on achieving 100 player kills. He became the first ever player to unlock the legendary Player Killer title. When equipped, it boosted attack and defense by 15%, and critical damage by 10%. The only catch? This god-tier buff only activated against players marked as murderers. Against normal players, it did nothing. But in this ruthless dog-eat-dog world, this was an absolute game-breaker. With this passive equipped, soloing entire guilds of player killers would be a total walk in the park. I have come this far, he smirked. I should hunt down the ultimate assassin title soon, but first, his body desperately needed to recover. He pulled out an ancient runic scroll, saving his exact coordinates in the swamp, and teleported straight back to the safe zone. The quest could wait. His inventory was literally bursting with high-tier loot. Dumping a mountain of blood-stained gear onto the auction house, he left the surrounding merchants completely speechless. With his newly acquired wealth, he purchased a phenomenally expensive safe zone creation artifact. It burned a massive hole in his wallet, but preventing a cowardly ambush while he rested was priceless. The monsters were evolving into living nightmares. The enemy guilds were multiplying like a plague. But for a regressor like him, that just meant more prey to hunt. Nothing could stop his march toward the absolute peak of power. Meanwhile, the guildmaster was practically frothing at the mouth. The news of his underling's humiliating defeat had just arrived. His lover, the very girl who lost the legendary cloak, clung to his arm. "Let it go for now," she pleaded. "We can deal with him later." But the guildmaster's eyes glowed with pure fury. "Shut your mouth," he roared. "Do you have any idea what that cloak is worth? That gear makes you practically invincible. It can crush high-tier players like bugs. You could throw mountains of gold at the market and still never buy it. Just you wait, you piece of trash. I will rip that cloak right off your dead body. Absolutely no one crosses me. Back to Rokan. He couldn't care less that his absolute massacre of 100 players was melting the internet. While social media forums burned with his name, our overpowered main character was busy. He was deep in the jungle, farming monsters with brutal efficiency. Blood rained down as he slaughtered everything in his path. Yet, despite the mountain of loot, the exact item he needed was still nowhere to be found. These jungle beasts were weak trash, but their numbers were endless. Finally, as the 999th monster turned to dust, a golden light flashed. There it was, the jungle monster fruit. Quest complete. Without wasting a second, Rokan set his sights on the next objective, the Pure Light Lake. Hidden deep within the primordial forest, its crystal-clear waters held a legendary secret. Just one sip of that pristine water would grant players a massive, temporary burst of vitality. Naturally, mages swarmed this place like flies, filling up entire backpacks with water bottles. But Rokan wasn't here for a drink. Martel had given him a much darker task. Eradicate the corrupted beasts roaming the lake's perimeter. The NPC's real goal? To test if the sacred lake still held its divine purification powers. Just as expected, the moment Rokan stepped near the shore, glowing red eyes pierced through the shadows. A vicious pack of blood bears and blood wolves were already prowling. But to an apex predator like Rokan, they were just walking exp. He painted the forest red, effortlessly harvesting their meat and the required jungle fruits. The monster's foul blood poured into the pristine lake, staining the crystal waters crimson. Suddenly, an enraged roar echoed. The cursed screams sent a chill through the air, but Rokan merely smirked. The water erupted as a massive NPC rose from the depths. "I know you," Rokan muttered. It was the level 100 Lake Knight. According to the game's tragic lore, this holy warrior fell hopelessly in love with the lake spirit. He swore a sacred oath to protect her waters, even beyond death itself. At level 100, this boss was an absolute nightmare. He had unlocked the terrifying ability to fuse skills from two entirely different classes, creating apocalyptic combo attacks. Fighting this love-struck zombie was going to be a massive waste of time. Rokan seriously considered just using a teleport scroll and coming back when he was stronger. But wait, defeating a level 100 boss was the exact requirement for his third-tier class advancement. Plus, if he managed to kill this guy, he could harvest the ultra-rare Lake Essence, an item of astronomical value. All right, let's dance. Rokan chose violence. The undead knight instantly gauged our hero's terrifying aura. He didn't hold back, immediately unleashing a catastrophic combo skill that materialized as crushing gravitational pressure. It was a third-tier enhancement art, forcefully injecting explosive mana straight into his blade. The destructive power was off the charts, but using it came with a fatal flaw. It violently consumed his own life force. Rokan's eyes narrowed. Why the hell is he burning his own HP to use an ultimate move right from the start? There was no time to think. The knight closed the distance in a flash, launching a barrage of frenzied, bone-crushing strikes. Rokan's legendary reflexes were pushed to the absolute limit just to dodge the deadly onslaught. Even though he parried the direct hits, the residual magical shockwaves were lethal. His health bar kept ticking down with every single clash. The real nightmare was the knight's water python skill. This wasn't just some basic defensive shield. The swirling water serpents acted as an offensive barrier, shredding anything that dared to touch them. But Rokan's eyes glowed with deadly calculation. "I've seen enough of your tricks." The probing phase was over. Rokan simultaneously triggered his battle axe and clairvoyance skills. The world slowed down as he locked onto the knight's critical weak point, swinging his weapon with earth-shattering force. But incredibly, the boss's monstrous defense absorbed the blow completely. 0 damage. Tough bastard. Rokan clicked his tongue. He instantly analyzed the battle data. A skill that overpowered definitely had a cooldown window. This time, he had to perfectly time his counterattack for a guaranteed lethal strike. But theory and practice were two different beasts. Even after activating his berserk state to overwhelm the boss with sheer rage, the knight's flawless parries were taking a toll. Rokan's weapon was groaning under the pressure, durability flashing red. It was going to shatter. I need to end this in one single, catastrophic strike. Rokan's mind raced, formulating the perfect execution. First, he triggered his leap skill, launching himself high. Into the sky! From above, he unleashed his weapon throw art, violently piercing through the lethal water python barrier. There. A split-second opening, but instead of dodging the counter, Rokhan intentionally took the hit, letting his health plummet below 4%. Gotcha! The hidden passive of the Lion King helmet activated, completely nullifying the knight's unbreakable armor. With a monstrous roar, Rokhan drove his blade straight through the exposed weak point. The sickening sound of metal tearing echoed as the boss was cleaved clean in half. Finally, it's over. But just as Rokhan reached out to claim his legendary loot, the severed upper torso began dragging itself toward the lake. Oh no, you don't! Rokhan lunged, driving his sword down for the final execution. Right on time. His berserk state wore off, sending a wave of agonizing fatigue through his body and crashing his health into the red zone. Without hesitation, Rokhan crushed a safe zone stone. A shimmering barrier expanded, granting him absolute sanctuary from any respawning monsters. As he caught his breath, the system interface exploded with golden fireworks. Ding! You have met the impossible conditions. Acquired title, Legendary Limit Breaker. The sheer power of this title was game-breaking, permanently elevating every single skill he owned by an entire tier. Victorious, he warped back to the city to repair his battered gear, while gathering a few extra quest items to dump on Martel. The NPC's jaw practically hit the floor when Rokhan turned in every single impossible quest at once. Incredible. Truly incredible, Martel stammered. But unfortunately, due to Rokhan's current level, the system blocked Martel from handing out the next chain quest. Rokhan, having lived this life before, already knew exactly how to break the script. With a sly grin, he placed a glowing vial of lake essence on the table. Martel's eyes widened in sheer terror. He knew that divine essence only dropped if the invincible Lake Knight was slain. You killed him? Realizing the monstrous predator sitting in front of him was far beyond a normal player, Martel surrendered to the system. He bypassed the level restriction, unlocking a terrifyingly high-tier quest: find and retrieve an ancient artifact overflowing with the aura of death. The promised reward was no joke. It included the Investigator's Ring, a godly support accessory so rare and overpowered, top rankers still used it well past level 100. Martel politely suggested that Rokhan seek out Investigator Hockey for clues, but our regressor main character just scoffed internally. Follow the normal questline? Yeah, right. He knew manipulating the underground black market was 1,000,000 times faster. Finding this Hockey guy through normal exploration was literally impossible, no matter how hard you searched. The game developers had hidden him behind a ridiculous fetch quest. To trigger the meeting, a player had to miraculously gather 15 lost diary pages, randomly scattered across hellish monster zones. And because the drop rates were agonizingly random, Rokhan remembered the pure suffering. In his past life, grinding for those final missing pages had driven him insane. But this time, he had the ultimate cheat code: foresight. Because the player base currently thought these pages were just useless junk items, they sold them for pennies. Rokhan had already sniped 11 of the pages straight from the auction house. Just 4 more pages, and the ring is mine. But as he casually scrolled through the community forums, a massive thread caught his eye. The entire server was panicking over the Blood Hunters. They were a notorious PK guild that had reigned as the ultimate nightmare for casual players. Ever since they officially consolidated their forces with high-tier psychos, the starting zones had turned into their personal slaughterhouses. Normal players were treated like livestock, ruthlessly hunted down and stripped of their hard-earned gear. But Rokhan's recent bloodbath at the riverside had shattered their invincible image. The community was finally waking up, and the Blood Hunter's reputation was in the dirt. Ironically, this was actually bad news for Rokhan. The guild was terrified of him now, completely avoiding any direct confrontation. Cowards, Rokhan muttered, his eyes narrowing as he plotted a way to drag every single one of them out and wipe them from the server. Wait a minute. A wicked smile spread across his face. The real estate auction. I can use the property bidding war as bait. If those rats are hiding, I'll just dangle some premium cheese and make them show their ugly faces. The very next day, the central plaza was absolutely packed with thousands of desperate players. Rumors of a massive real estate auction had drawn out the entire server. Standing at the podium was an incredibly suave old man in a razor-sharp suit, radiating pure charisma. Welcome, my esteemed guests, to the auction of a lifetime. But beneath the wrinkled face and classy attire, It was none other than Rokhan, abusing his high-tier identity disguise skill. This flawless illusion would only last for exactly 1 hour. The auction kicked off with explosive energy. Rokhan wasted no time, instantly projecting a massive holographic display of the properties to flex on the crowd. The first items on the chopping block: premium 3-story mansions, and the starting bids. The starting bid? 10 gold coins per month. Instantly, an armored warrior roared his agreement. But that was just the spark. A fierce bidding war erupted, and the numbers skyrocketed. The price completely shattered the 20 gold mark. The arrogant MB Guildmaster screamed a bid of 22. But Rokhan didn't even blink. He completely ignored the fool. If there are no other takers, I'll lock it in at 20 gold. For the armored gentleman over there. Rokhan slammed the metaphorical hammer, awarding it to the ironclad guild. The MB Guildmaster was foaming at the mouth with rage, but Rokhan coldly stared him down. Break the auction rules again, and your entire guild is disqualified. Consider this your first and only warning. The pressure radiating from our OP main character was absolute. Still, even Rokhan was slightly amused. He didn't expect a supposedly elite player to throw such a pathetic tantrum. Murderous intent flared in the Guildmaster's eyes. Just wait until this auction ends, he vowed internally. I will drag you and your trash-tier guild into the deepest abyss of hell. Meanwhile, the auction continued flawlessly. The hammer struck again. Property number 4 was locked in at a staggering 25 gold coins. The humiliated Guildmaster watched from the sidelines, his blood boiling with pure jealousy. He clenched his fists, desperately trying to cope. Patience, he whispered to himself. There are plenty of properties left. If I just wait it out, I can easily snatch up the cheapest one. But an SSS-rank player's intuition is absolute. Rokhan read him like an open book and delivered a crushing announcement. A bombshell that shattered the room. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our final property. The Guildmaster's face went completely pale. Total panic consumed him. His pathetic strategy had just backfired spectacularly. Rokhan smirked, announcing the final starting bid. At 15 gold coins, the desperate Guildmaster shot his hand into the air, screaming like a madman. 35 gold! No, wait, 40! We bid 40 gold coins! Nobody can top that! He was practically begging at this point. Rokhan's lips curled into a victorious smile. Sold for 40 gold coins. He officially awarded the final 2-story estate to the now bankrupt Guildmaster. But despite finally winning a property, the man was consumed by humiliation and wrath. He swore to uncover this mysterious contractor's true identity. Clutching the system contract in his trembling hands, reality finally struck him. The price was astronomically high. His guild's economy was completely crippled for the foreseeable future. But before he could even process his hollow victory, Rokhan dropped another devastating bomb. Now, let the auction for the 3-story mansions begin. The Guildmaster's jaw hit the floor. His face twisted in absolute fury. He pointed a trembling finger, screaming about system fraud. But the rules were ironclad. The official forum post had never specified the total inventory. It was a brutal, flawless trap, and it was perfectly legal. Outsmarted and outplayed, the loser had no choice but to retreat. Seething with venom, he vanished into a hidden underground base. But the moment he stepped into the shadows, a terrifying hand locked around his throat. You dare squander our entire treasury on one pathetic 2-story shack? The voice dripping with malice echoed through the dark. If you weren't still a useful pawn, I would have deleted your avatar right here. Choking back his fear, he surrendered the system contract to the shadowy figure. His humiliation festered into lethal obsession. There was only one way to restore his lost honor. The mysterious contractor, Rokhan, had to be eliminated. The shadow towering over him chuckled darkly, nodding in agreement. This time, the true mastermind would step onto the battlefield. He wouldn't leave this to incompetent fools. Tearing open his system interface, he activated a guild summon. Blood Hunters, assemble. The order echoed through the server. We erased the target known as Rokhan tonight. Meanwhile, our legendary returnee had already stepped right into the center of their kill zone. But for an OP main character, an ambush is just an invitation to slaughter. He tore through the vanguard like a divine storm. Skip the tutorial trash, he taunted over the screams. Send out the final boss already. But unfortunately for him, the Blood Hunters weren't your average mob characters. They deployed a highly coordinated hit-and-run system formation. The vanguard fighters danced around his strike zone, patiently waiting for his cooldowns to launch precise counters. Meanwhile, from the backline, elemental mages rained relentless fireballs from above. It was a classic stamina-draining maneuver. Parrying the fiery onslaught, Rokan's tactical mind raced. His predator-like gaze swept the battlefield. Something was completely off about this enemy raid party. A few of these players radiated genuine high-level aura, yet they were holding back their ultimate skills. They weren't committing to a fatal strike, but they weren't retreating either. They were merely circling him like annoying vultures. The realization hit him they were stalling, waiting for reinforcements. How beautifully predictable. Seconds later, the sky tore open. 3 massive teleportation pillars crashed down behind the enemy lines. The surviving grunts cheered like they had already won the game. Their ultimate trump cards had finally arrived. Emerging from the blinding light were the guild's top 3 rankers. First to step out was a massive, bald juggernaut, the infamous Skull Crusher, Bulldozer, a terrifying level 79 tank. Standing right beside him was the guild vice master, Javelin, an equally lethal level 79 spearman. But the true nightmare stood in the center. The guildmaster himself, a level 94 shadow assassin named 𝒂𝒏𝒌. The atmosphere grew suffocatingly heavy. Having cleared out the tutorial mobs, Rokan wiped the blood from his blade. The real raid was finally about to begin. Facing the guild's absolute strongest, his gamer instincts flared. With god-tier reflexes, he instantly vanished from his spot. Boom! A devastating hammer smash obliterated the ground where he just stood. The shockwave alone tore through the earth. Bulldozer was an absolute monster of pure brute force. Even our OP protagonist had to acknowledge that ridiculous strength. To wield such a massive warhammer with dual-wielding mastery, that required an insane system strength stat. But there was no time to analyze. A flash of silver cut through the dust cloud. Rokan contorted his body, barely evading a supersonic thrust from Javelin. The Vice Master's spear techniques were horrifyingly sharp. These elites were in a completely different dimension from the trash he just slaughtered. But what truly set off his danger sense was the Guildmaster. 𝒂𝒏𝒌 hadn't moved a single inch since teleporting in. He was just standing there, whispering dark incantations in the shadows. What in the world was that creepy bastard casting? Rokan's instincts screamed at him to cancel that spell immediately. If that cast finishes, things are going to get incredibly messy. But getting to the boss meant breaking through the Twin Guardians first. The raid mechanics were painfully obvious to a veteran returnee. The brute tank locked down the close-quarters combat zone, while the spearman controlled the mid-range with massive area of effect sweeps, a perfectly balanced frontline formation. If I pop my Berserker Awakening skill right now, Rokan calculated, I could probably wipe both of these mini-bosses off the map in seconds. But blowing my ultimate cooldowns this early is a rookie mistake. The shadowy Guildmaster was still an unknown variable. He needed to probe their defenses first. Activating his flash step skill, Rokan vanished into thin air. He rocketed forward like a human missile. It was time to test their true aggro range. Bulldozer braced his giant hammer, anticipating a head-on collision. But at the absolute last microsecond, Rokan defied gravity. He launched himself high into the sky, leaving the tank swinging at empty air. The brute wasn't the target at all. His crosshairs were locked dead onto Javelin in the back line. But the cunning Vice Master just smiled ominously. This was exactly what the spearman wanted. A player stuck in an aerial trajectory has 0 evasion frames. Javelin channeled his aura, aiming directly. For Rokan's exposed midsection, the silver spear erupted like a beam of pure light. Javelin's eyes widened with absolute certainty of victory. The projectile phased right into the target's torso, or so he thought. A deafening metallic clash echoed through the air. Rokan hung, suspended in midair, gripping the deadly weapon with his bare hands. Nice aim, for a blind guy. Our MC mocked with a devilish grin. Javelin was paralyzed with pure horror. He had stacked tracking buffs on that lethal throw. How could this monster possibly catch a skill-enhanced projectile? Here, let me return the favor, Rokan roared. He hurled the stolen spear back with earth-shattering velocity. Recognizing the fatal trajectory, Javelin didn't even try to block. He instantly activated his emergency artifact. A magic ring flared on his finger, triggering a spatial blink. He materialized several meters backward, exhaling in relief. He had dodged the lethal counter. But he had vastly underestimated an SSS-rank veteran's combat IQ. The returned spear was nothing but a pathetic decoy. Spinning right behind it was Rokan's true finisher, a devastating throwing axe. The Vice Master didn't even have time to scream. Squelch! His avatar was brutally cleaved perfectly in half, dissolving into pixels. Well, that's one down, Rokan chuckled, turning his icy gaze to the giant tank. You better show me a real boss phase, fatty. I'm getting bored. Witnessing his comrade's brutal execution, Bulldozer completely lost his mind. He roared like a wounded beast and charged with reckless fury. His attack power was off the charts, but his rage made him tragically predictable. His massive swings tore up the terrain, but his attack speed was painfully sluggish. Rokhan danced through the deadly hammer strikes like a phantom. Finding the perfect opening, he leaped onto the giant's back and with a brutal twist, snapped his neck like a twig. Ding! A glorious system window chimed, announcing a fresh level up. The twin guardians were dead. Only the final boss remained. The guildmaster hadn't lifted a single finger to save his elites. What a pathetic coward, Rokhan scoffed. Without a second thought, our MC activated Flash Step again. He materialized right in front of Cable, unleashing a fatal downward strike. But just as the blade was about to connect, the terrifying incantation finally reached 100% completion. The boss had fully synchronized with the shadowy environment. Boom! Countless tendrils of abyss-black light violently erupted from the ground. The sinister aura completely deflected Rokhan's flawless strike. What in the world was this twisted system mechanic? Cable's eyes glowed with an unholy crimson light. My subordinates did not die in vain, you arrogant fool. His voice echoed from every shadow in the area. Their sacrifices fueled my ultimate awakening. While you were busy playing with those pathetic pawns, the darkness began to swallow the entire battlefield. I was busy devouring every single soul in this domain. Cable levitated off the ground, radiating absolute despair. Welcome to my absolute territory, Rokhan. The pieces of the puzzle finally slammed together in Rokhan's mind. The ominous aura, the soul-devouring. This bastard possessed a legendary hidden class. He was a phantom master. In his past life, our OP returnee had only heard rumors of such a broken, game-breaking profession. It had to be him. But Rokhan didn't care. Activating his leap skill, he launched himself forward. He swung his battle axe in a frenzy of pure destruction. The blade cleaved right through the dark magic. With a sickening crunch, he sliced his opponent perfectly in half. But it was a trick. Just another shadow clone. The real enemy materialized right behind him like an immortal phantom. After a brutal exchange, Rokhan's health plummeted to 50%. To make matters worse, the lethal poison and bleeding effects kicked in. But thanks to his insane poison resistance, the main character pushed himself back up. Don't look so desperate, the enemy mocked, because this nightmare has only just begun. Rokhan knew exactly who he was facing. The master of the Blood Hunt Guild, the infamous 8th ranker of the Ragnarok Guild. Nidhogg, that entire guild was a bunch of lunatics. They literally role-played as Norse gods. I hate to admit it, but they are undeniably the absolute strongest players in the entire game of the last. They looked united on the surface, but behind closed doors, their internal politics were an absolute bloodbath. What blew my mind was that top-tier players would blindly abandon their own guilds just to follow Odin. They dumped massive amounts of real money just to change their in-game names. And right here was one of their most annoying lapdogs. A toxic assassin who manipulated shadows and deadly gas. Nidhogg, named after the legendary dragon that gnaws at the roots of the world tree. Honestly, I couldn't care less about their cringe role-playing. All that mattered was the monster standing right in front of me. Judging by his combat style, he hadn't fully unlocked his draconic powers yet. His stance gave it away. He had started as an assassin class, and then advanced to the hidden class, Shadow Lord. His level was dangerously high. His agility stat was probably double mine. Left with 0 options, Rokhan made a crazy gamble. He activated Tier 2 Berserk, willingly burning his own life force, to force a massive 200% boost across all his stats. The Shadow Lord instantly felt the terrifying explosion of aura. He knew it was a temporary buff, and the deadly side effects that came with it. Yet the arrogant ranker just sneered, believing a mere skill couldn't bridge the massive gap between them. What followed was an earth-shattering clash. Steel sang against shadows in a symphony of destruction. But no matter how hard Rokhan swung, he couldn't touch the main body. Every time he ripped a shadow to shreds, another one spawned from the darkness. Drunk on his own overwhelming power, Nidhogg laughed. You think that pathetic trick can reach me? Mindless physical attacks mean absolutely nothing in this domain. Did you forget? This entire zone is under my absolute control. As long as I am synchronized with the shadows, I can read your every heartbeat and teleport anywhere to watch you swing at thin air. Rokhan tuned out the villain's monologue. He focused entirely on channeling his ultimate berserk. This forbidden skill granted him godlike destructive power for a few fleeting moments. But the penalty was devastating. His stats would completely crash the moment it ended. It was the ultimate double-edged sword. I have to shatter this domain of darkness. It's the core of his power. If I can just strip away the shadows, that will be my one and only opening. Then I can wipe him out with a massive area of effect strike. 20 agonizing minutes passed. Rokan's mortal body was hitting its absolute limit. The Shadow Lord practically drooled at the sight of his struggling prey. I want the whole server to witness how effortlessly I crush you. I honestly never expected to try this hard in a simple one-on-one duel. This is the end. Die drowning in your own regrets. But just as the assassin moved in for the execution, Rokan flashed a terrifying smirk. A blinding holy light erupted from his body. Nidhogg froze in absolute panic. Rokan had secretly consumed a stat-boosting pill and violently triggered his electric shock skill, summoning a massive, roaring storm of lightning. I saved these pills from my early quest days. Never thought I'd be burning my last one here. But this is the only way to obliterate his shadow source. But the lightning would only hold back the dark for a few precious moments. The system countdown flashed. 5 seconds left before the skill expired. Burning every last drop of his remaining life force, Rokan unleashed one apocalyptic, all-or-nothing strike. The system chimes rang out. Berserk skill terminated. Quest completely cleared. Level up. As the dust settled, only the top half of the Shadow Lord remained. He screamed in pure, humiliating agony. How could I lose to trash like you? Just you wait. I swear I'll drag you to hell. With that final curse, he shattered into digital dust. The adrenaline faded, and Rokan finally collapsed. He frantically chugged health and mana potions just to stay conscious. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't entirely sure I'd survive that. He was hands down the deadliest monster I've faced since my return to the past. I never expected the Bloodhunt Master to join Ragnarok this early in the timeline. If it wasn't for my newly acquired system titles, I would have been slaughtered, especially the Limit Breaker title. Without that passive buff, it would have been game over. But the real prize of this bloodbath was a glowing magic ring. It granted a unique backward evasion of 3 meters, even with a strict 1 use per day cooldown. For a Berserker class that only had aggressive charge skills, this defensive dodge was basically a second life. I'll make this artifact count. Wait. A realization struck him. I've just crushed 2 major future executives of the Ragnarok Guild. The butterfly effect is real. The future timeline is already fracturing. If those guys don't join Ragnarok this time around, who the hell is going to take their place? And what twisted schemes is Odin brewing in the shadows? Odin was definitely a looming nightmare. But right now, Pyria was the immediate threat breathing down his neck. They sent their top dog to hunt me down, so they must be desperate. Rokan's eyes burned with defiant fire. Bring it on. Whoever wants a piece of me, step right up and die. Arriving safely back at the safe zone city, our overpowered main character equipped a badass new gear set. I need to aggressively max out my critical hit rate, thanks to my stack of legendary titles. My base crit is already sitting at 20%. With this new armor set, it skyrockets straight to 40%. Basically, every single swing of his axe would trigger a devastating critical strike. Paired with his overpowered legendary weapon, he was officially unstoppable. And that's all for today's epic recap. Make sure to smash that like button and share the video. Your support fuels the channel and helps us bring you more legendary manhwa content. See you in the next chapter.